My name is Dave Farley. I'm an independent software consultant these days. My background is a software developer, and I'm one of the authors of the Continuous Delivery book and the Reactive Manifesto. I think that like many things, we've tended to misuse the word engineer, and when we talk about engineer, we just mean somebody that's a bit technical, and I think it's got a more precise definition than that. I think that engineering in other disciplines means something very specific. It means the application of scientific rational reasoning to solving practical problems within economic constraints. And I think we should be looking for something like that to apply to software development. Another line of reasoning that I've had recently when thinking about engineering is that if we were able to define what software engineering really meant, it would be as true in 100 years' time as it is now, because it would be that generic, it would be that general. And I think we should be looking for those kinds of definitions. I think that the sorts of job titles that you talked about are ephemeral. I think that there is something that should be software engineering, but we haven't really been doing that very much. And I think that previous attempts to define what software engineering meant in the past have failed. And so my talk at the conference today is going to be on that theme, to try and talk a little bit about some practices that might be true in 100 years' time, and to think about what applying that kind of scientific rational reasoning to software development would really mean. And I'm going to explore 5 different themes. I think there's more than this to define what software engineering should be, but I think for me it's inconceivable that anything that we would define as an engineering discipline in the context of software wouldn't be iterative, it wouldn't be based on feedback, it wouldn't be incremental, it wouldn't be experimental, and it wouldn't be based on empirical reasoning. And I think that we need to adopt all of those 5 approaches to software development to claim any kind of engineering for ourselves. It's a funny kind of contradiction that continuous delivery is hugely about automation, and yet for me at least the tools are unimportant. The right mindset is much more central. Continuous delivery for me is a holistic thing. So I make a living these days advising companies, usually reasonably large companies, on how to adopt this kind of discipline. And I talk to my clients that you need to be able to perform in 3 different dimensions. You need to have great technical performance for sure, but you also need to have great organizational performance, and you need to have great cultural performance. If you fail in any one of those dimensions, you're not going to achieve it. My favorite kind of soundbite definition for continuous delivery is you're trying to optimize the process from having an idea to getting working software out into the hands of users so that you can figure out what they make of the software. And that's it. And if you think about what the implications of that are, it kind of touches on all software development. You've got to have effective, highly collaborative small teams. You've got to have great story on test, build, deployment, automation, configuration management. You've got to have great relationships with operations, telemetry from production, all of those things. Organizationally, you've got to have a great story in terms of requirements and planning so that you achieve a flow through the process. All of these things must be effective and efficient to genuinely achieve a continuous delivery kind of process. And you'll notice I haven't said anything about any of the tools in there. So the descriptions of tools and so on that sometimes we use are really just examples of how you apply that kind of thinking, and the actual tool that you use or the set of tools are very much secondary. I would also say that I don't think that there are any tools that are good enough yet on their own. So I think there are some significant gaps. In my experience, all of the teams that I've seen that have been highly effective at continuous delivery have, to a significant degree, built some of their own tools. So you can get stuff off the shelf, you can get some tools that will help, but none of them are yet complete solutions. So yeah, the Reactive Manifesto has been around for a surprisingly long time. Whether it's state of the art, I think it's a state of the art. I think that there are other flavours of software development that are probably viable. I've got a suspicion that the Reactive Manifesto might become increasingly valid over time. And I think to some extent we're seeing that. We're seeing an awful lot of people talking about event source systems, CQRS patterns, these sorts of things that are all kind of within that style of computing. The biggest difference that I perceive in terms of popular kind of leading edge approaches is probably the difference between serverless computing and the Reactive Manifesto, because most reactive systems, actor-based systems and so on, tend to be a bit more stateful than serverless systems, and so there's an interesting tension there, I suppose, because serverless is lovely for the cloud providers, but I think that the reactive systems are nicer to program. And so, at what point does the ease of programming overtake the ease of provision of those things? And I think that will happen, but there's not much that I can think of at the level at which the Reactive Manifesto defines properties of modern 21st century systems that I think that we got wrong. What I wish we'd called them events rather than messages, but apart from that, I think we were on the money. I think we were pretty close. Absolutely, I think that's the case. I think one of the most profound impacts of the Agile Manifesto was to recenter the customer at the heart of software development. Having said that, most people don't follow the Agile Manifesto, so they don't recenter the customer at the heart of their software development, but I think they should. So I think that's deeply important. I'm a strong believer in an approach to design called domain-driven design as well, which is very centered on the problem domain and understanding the customer's needs and stuff. Is really central to that kind of type of design. I suppose of late my professional interest, and certainly continuous delivery and the Reactive Manifesto, are a little bit more technically focused than the engineering stuff, but that doesn't mean that I think that that's more important than understanding customer need and the problem domain. My belief in continuous delivery in particular is that its real importance is as a process and as a set of technologies that support a process approach. What it gives you is an experimental platform that allows you to more quickly evaluate whether you're hitting customer need. And that's the real business value. The data from the industry says that organizations that practice continuous delivery make more money than organizations that don't. And we've never had anything like that. And the reason for that is not because we build cool, funky tests or nice deployment pipelines. It's because we get out into the market faster and see how our ideas land with our customers. And I think that's profoundly important.